Demographics tally specific information about particular populations, ages, levels of education, income brackets, and such. It's long been useful, even essential, to businesses, politicians, and policymakers. Now, as the Facebook data mining scandal helped make plain, there's a new game in town: Psychographics. Joining us now to explain the emerging world of micro-targeting in the nation's capital, Erin Kelly. She's CEO of the market research firm Advanced Symbolics. And here in our studio, Jacob Hirsch, Assistant Professor of Organizational Behavior and Human Resource Management at the University of Toronto's Institute for Management and Innovation, and is with the Rotman School of Management as well. And we are delighted to welcome both of you to our program tonight. And let's get our understanding of what psychographics are and distinguishing them from demographics. And to do so, we are going to turn to somebody who maybe we hadn't heard very much about a couple of months ago, but now we know a lot about. This is Alexander Nix, the now suspended CEO of Cambridge Analytica, a firm that helped itself to 50 million profiles of American Facebook users. Let's roll it.
Most communication companies today still segment their audiences by demographics and geographics. But when you pause for just a moment, this is a really ridiculous idea. The idea that all women should receive the same message because of their gender, or all African Americans because of their race, or all old people, or rich people, or young people to get the same message because of their demographics just doesn't make any sense. Clearly, demographics and geographics and economics will influence your worldview. But equally important, or probably more important, are psychographics. That is an understanding of your personality, because it's personality that drives behavior, and behavior that obviously influences how you vote. Blanket advertising. Blanket advertising, the idea that 100 million people will receive the same piece of direct mail, the same television advert, the same digital advert, is dead. My children will certainly never ever understand this concept of mass communication. Today, communication is becoming ever increasingly targeted. It's being individualized for every single person in this room.
Okay, let's dive into this. Erin, to you first. The notion that psychographics are far more useful than demographics. You on side for that?
Yes, depending on what it is you're trying to measure. I would say if psychographics is something we've been using for years and years. I'm surprised to hear Mr. Nix say it's something new. But yes, particularly for certain segments, things that we're trying to measure, say in the travel industry, we use psychographics a lot. In commercial work, we use psychographics a lot. I wouldn't say that geographic-based things are irrelevant. They're very relevant depending on what it is you're trying to measure. Demographics are still relevant, again, depending on what it is you're trying to measure. But psychographics definitely are something that have been used for years in the communications, advertising, and PR industries.
Erin, let me do a follow-up with you. You mentioned in the travel industry, so let's take that as an example. Why is it more useful in that case to know about psychographics than demographics?
Because when we're looking at, for example, trying to attract people to travel to Canada, there are different types of travelers. There's what we call the historical traveler. These are people who like to go to Rome and Egypt and do historical travel. There's hedonistic travelers who like to go whitewater rafting and skiing on the big hills and things like that. So it's not based on how old you are or whether you're male or female or how much money you make. It's what you like to do. So when we're trying to attract people to come to Canada as a destination, we want to sell it, for example, to the hedonistic traveler or to the adventure traveler, the business traveler, and less, for example, to the historical traveler, because Canada is, a younger country and wouldn't appeal to that psychographic as much.
Gotcha. Jacob, in terms of marketing campaigns, psychographics more important than demographics in your view?
Well, ultimately, psychographics are what many demographic campaigns are trying to get to. The idea of categorizing people into different social groups based upon their social status or their income or their ethnicity or gender is all about assuming that they share certain psychological characteristics. They will respond to certain products, to certain messages in a similar way. Ultimately, the goal of the demographic data collection is really to get at the psychographics. Psychographics, as a complement to that approach, tries to get there more directly, to say, let's understand what's going on inside the minds of these people, and how can we actually use that to better deliver the message we're trying to send them.
You say as a complement to that approach, so this may not necessarily be a discussion about psychographics versus demographics, but rather psychographics and demographics?
Absolutely. Really, it's a conversation about using as much data as you have to try to predict how someone is going to respond to a particular message.
In which case, Aaron, you're in our nation's capital. How about politics? Psychographics, how useful would that be in trying to get somebody to put an X on a particular place on a ballot?
Well, in terms of the election work, we were actually very successful in predicting, all the elections that Cambridge Analytica purports to do. We didn't use psychographics for that, and that's where we have a lot of issues with the way Cambridge Analytica approached this. For the election, it was because elections, people are talking about the issues and they're talking about the campaign so much when it's happening, you don't actually need to look at psychographics. You can actually look at what people are looking at, what they are saying, what articles they are sharing, and that would give you a much better view of who's going to vote this way or that way. And you can categorize them into demographics. You can categorize them into psychographics if you like. And geographics are obviously very important.
All right.
For an election.
Jacob, following up with you, this is a big thing now because, of course, Cambridge Analytica tried to, apparently, influence a lot of people to vote for Donald Trump in the last American national election. Is there any evidence that it actually worked?
Well, we don't have direct evidence that it worked because we don't know what they did exactly. We have a broad idea of what they did in terms of trying to extract the data from Facebook and then utilize that to generate psychological profiles or personality profiles of the electorate. That information was then used as part of their campaign process for targeting messages. The effectiveness in this particular campaign example, we don't know for sure, but we do know that the tactic or the strategy of using personality-based models of the people in the audience and then tailoring your message in order to suit that audience works very well. And in advertising, for example, it's been shown to increase purchases by up to 50% when you're using tailored advertisements based on the personality profile of the consumer compared to non-tailored responses.
So as a general notion, you know that this works, but what's your best educated guess as to whether or not it worked in the specific example of the last American election?
In this specific example, it sounds like it was one component of a much larger campaign, and you might want to think about it as psychographics beta. We're in the early stages of applying this type of technique, and they were using the data that they had to construct psychological profiles of Americans and perhaps British people and other people around the world as well. But it's certainly not at the perfected state of the science that it could be.
Aaron, what's your best educated guess as to whether or not Trump benefited from this in the last U.S. election?
So the first thing I'd like to say is we can actually prove whether it worked or not. And this is the part I find really puzzling about Cambridge Analytica. They seem to be happy to talk about the effect that they had, but not happy to prove it. The great thing about social media is the posts are all still there. If they were to give the content to us or any researcher, to a university, to verify their claims, we would be able to verify them. And I think that's what should be happening at this point. I don't really want to guess as to how effective it was. I think the techniques that they describe using would not have been effective to influence the election. And here's why. They said they used the ocean psychographics. When we do psychographics, we do the psychographics from the ground up. First of all, when you're trying to micro-target any individual, your margin of error is going to be very high. You probably didn't know what you were going to be doing today, Steve. Chaos ensues. Things happen to you in an unexpected way in your day. Trying to target an individual, that's what fortune tellers do. Actuaries look at populations of people. So the first thing you need to do is you need the psychographics to come from the ground up. What Cambridge Analytica did is they set these profiles up ahead of time and said some people are open, some people are agreeable, some people are extroverted. It's called the ocean demographics. It's been used for quite a while, actually. You see them up in advertising firms everywhere you go. And they tried to pigeonhole people into one of these 5 categories and say, well, if you're an extroverted person, you're probably going to vote for Hillary Clinton. No, it's a lot more complicated than that. So as a company that has done this and works in prescriptive analytics, and that's what it's called when you influence things, it's called prescriptive, it's much more complicated than categorizing people into one of 5 categories. Because guess what? Some days you're more neurotic than others. I mean, when you're sitting and doing a media interview, you might be feeling more neurotic today than you are tomorrow when you're sitting in front of your TV, drinking a coffee and watching the morning news. So people's personalities change throughout the day, throughout the month. So trying to pigeonhole people and saying this is how they're feeling today, therefore they're going to vote for Clinton or Trump, that's the thing I take issue with. I don't think they did it the way they described they did it, I don't see that working in any very effective way. That's not to say that prescriptive analytics cannot work. As Josh said, yes, it can if you're doing it properly, and it's a very complex area of science.
Okay, Professor Hirsch, I want to tap into your experience and knowledge here on a study that you were involved with, trying to affect choice using psychographic information. You know the study I'm talking about? Maybe help us out with this.
Well, so this is a study that we published in 2012, and it was basically a prototype version of this type of message tailoring based on personality profiles of the recipient audience. So we started out with a smartphone advertisement, a generic smartphone. We made 5 different versions of this advertisement. We had one for each of the 5 major dimensions of personality in the ocean model, as Aaron was just describing. So there's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. This is the structure of personality. So this isn't simply something that advertisers have come up with. This is personality psychologists over decades have developed this scientific framework. It is actually currently the best framework we have right now for understanding how people are different from one another. Trying to map what someone is like, we need to use the ocean model. That's what the scientific literature actually uses. In this particular study, we built on that, and we actually tailored the content of the advertisements to hit on the key motivational properties of each trait dimension. So extroversion, for instance, we know is associated with reward sensitivity and the desire for social attention. So in the advertisement copy, we had the same image, the same text at the top, but then keywords inserted to be relevant to that particular trait dimension. So do you want to have the attention you deserve in life? Do you want the status and power you've always been wanting? That targets an extroverted personality. Someone who is low on extroversion is just not going to resonate with those
You
particular
wouldn't use that
types.
copy. You'd use something else in that case.
You do something else. So we had 5 different versions of this advertisement, and we found that people were much more receptive to the advertisements when it was congruent with their own personality profile.
That suggests to me, Aaron, that if you applied those same principles to a political campaign, you would be far more persuasive than just running, as Alexander Nix said off the top, than running some generic ad designed to hit 100 million people, but which didn't necessarily hit you where you live. Is that fair to say?
Nobody is using generic ads that I know of on social media or in any targeted advertising way. It's always targeted. Now, some people will use the ocean prototype. Others, like us, do a much more personalized ground-up thing. And yes, like I said, prescriptive analytics, it does work. There's much more sophisticated tools now that we can use now with artificial intelligence than bucketing everybody into one of 5 categories. We have tons and tons of categories, like I mentioned, when we do our tourism stuff, much more precise, and we feel much more effective. But it's also important to understand that even with whatever psychographics you're using, whether it's ocean or others, you're not getting people to do things they would not otherwise want to do. So what you're doing is you're saying, you're extroverted, I'm going to give you an ad that is tailored to extroverted people because that is what you are. When it comes to getting people to do things, for instance, when you see targeted ads in advertising, you're seeing skis because they know you're shopping for skis. They're not going to show you skis if you are a person who lives in the desert and doesn't like skiing. So it's also important to understand that what these ads are doing is trying to get the message to the people who are going to be receptive to them. So the extent to which people change their vote or said, I really like Hillary Clinton, but because I saw this ad, I'm now going to vote for Donald Trump. What we do in elections is we try to get the content to the people we think are going to be receptive to it. In the work we do in prescriptive analytics, we do things like we're reducing suicide rates, we're reducing smoking rates, et cetera, because there are different tools and different ads are going to work for different people, but we're not going to get people to do things they wouldn't otherwise want to do.
No, I get you.
Want to,
I get you on this,
yeah.
Aaron, but I want to bring you back to politics for a second, because obviously we've got an election campaign here in just over 2 months in the province of Ontario, and not only am I, but I suspect all the campaigns are extremely interested to know if you are able to persuade potential voters to go one way as opposed to another way. Can you do that?
I think you could do it on you can certainly do it for some. To what extent you're able to do it, we have, for us, we measure the election outcomes. We don't work for any political party, so we haven't tried to persuade people. Our own feeling is that you could sway If you were micro-targeting, you would be swaying fewer people than if you were using psychographic targeting. But we don't think that in a close selection, you could have an impact. We don't think you're persuading huge swaths of the population just based on ads. They might like this ad better, but will it make them change their vote? That is something that can be proven, though. It can be studied. So we're looking at working with some of these groups now to prove this.
Okay, Jacob, let me get you to follow up. In the case, and I'm not sure how many undecided voters there truly are at this point in the campaign, but let's say there are some and they are there. Through the use of not demographics, but psychographics, can you make those, maybe make is the wrong word, can you influence those undecided voters to go one way over another?
Well, as Aaron's saying, there's very little evidence of using this in the political domain. So it's where you have to be a bit cautious here and skeptical. But based on the application of these models to other areas of psychology and other areas of predicting behavior, there's reason to believe that some people will indeed be influenced or persuadable, especially the people who are sitting on the fence. If you're stuck in the fence and you don't know whether to go for this candidate or this candidate, and then everyone is bombarding you with information, that information that resonates with your values, with your psychological mindset, might be just enough to push you over the edge to that candidate. But it's not just the people sitting on the fence, it's also about rallying up the base and trying to keep down the opposition's base. So we know that in many of the campaigns, there was a concerted effort to target people. So for instance, to target Hillary Clinton supporters who might not be that enthusiastic about her and give her just the right content to stop them from going out to vote on election day.
Can we go, Aaron, even further than that? Can we say, here is a typical big L liberal voter, and through the use of your methods, I'd like to deliver that vote to Doug Ford and the progressive conservatives. Do you think, do you think your methods are powerful enough to be able to do that?
Not yet. No, I would say the prescriptive analytics right now works best, as Professor Hirsch was saying, for people who are undecided, sitting on the fence. Really what it's often used for is to make sure that big L liberal, if you're on the Doug Ford campaign, you don't want that big L liberal to show up at the polls, right? You want to make sure that your conservatives, you have enough conservatives showing up at the polls. So mostly it's used to say, I want to make sure that the people I know are going to vote for me come to the polls. And I want to make it clear that's not us because we don't work for a political party, but in terms of changing somebody who's really going to vote for Kathleen Wynne and trying to get that person to change because you sent them some ad copy, I'm very skeptical about that at the moment. It's really for people who are unsure and who have specific issues that they want to have addressed, and their vote is winnable one way or the other, depending on which candidate addresses their issues.
Okay, but you've admittedly said we're in early days when it comes to this stuff. If you and I are having this conversation with Jacob Hirsch in 10 years' time, let's say, what do you think your answer will be then?
I think scientists will get better at it. And again, it will be at figuring out, but it's always, what you have to do is figure out what motivates people, right? So I think they'll get better at it. I think we'll see that application less in political campaigns. The challenge with political campaigns is they're short. So I think you would see this happen in other fields before you'd see it happen in politics. But who knows, maybe in 10 years, they'll be better at it, but I think you're always still going to be getting those people who are closer to the undecided level. You're not going to get the diehard people who are already sure of who they're going to vote for.
Gotcha. Jacob, let me put this quote to you. This is from a British researcher who says, psychographics are much more accurate for groups rather than individual people. If that's the case, aren't psychographics meant to tailor messages to the particular individuals that we are?
Well, the thing about using personality psychology as a basis for message tailoring is that most things are only moderately predicted by your personality. Let's suppose that I develop a database with the personality profile, the estimated personality profile of everyone in Canada. That doesn't mean I know what everyone is going to do throughout their day, but it means that I can predict at better than chance many of their different behaviors, many of the choices they're going to make, many of the purchases they're going to make, many of the social interactions they're going to have, the jobs they're going to be interested in. Your personality defines a lot of your life trajectory, but it's not deterministic, it's probabilistic. And when you're dealing with probabilistic models, they're always more accurate in the aggregate. Any one individual, you might get it wrong. I might say that, well, this is your personality, so here's your advertisement. I might be wrong about you. But if the model is accurate and is able to predict reasonably well or better than alternative models, in the aggregate, you will see these population group-based effects.
Okay. Aaron, let me...
Can I jump in there,
please.
Steve?
Please do.
Yeah, because I think that's really, really important what Professor Hurst has just said, because we don't need to be micro-targeting people. Like I said in the beginning, if you're micro-targeting an individual, your margin of error is going to be very large. So we can have legislation that protects personally identifiable information while still allowing research and polling and all of these kinds of things. That's the part that I find very weird about what Cambridge Analytica has done. So most research is done at the population level without micro-targeting individuals, precisely because, as Professor Hirsch said, it's more accurate when you do it that way. Trying to predict what any individual is going to do on a given day, like I said, that's like a fortune teller's job. The actuary's job is to figure out how to give life insurance policies to populations because they are much more reliable in terms of measurement.
Well, Aaron, if you don't mind, let me lead the witness a little bit here, okay? Most of the world that decided to weigh in on Brexit thought that the Remain camp was going to win. You analyzed it. What did you predict?
We predicted an exit at 52%.
So you were bang on. All right, let me do one more.
We were.
Most of the world that was in the prediction business thought Hillary Clinton was going to beat Donald Trump. You looked at it. What did you come up with?
We said that Donald Trump would, we said that Hillary Clinton would win the popular vote, and we said we weren't sure because we hadn't done the college districts, how that would impact on the electoral college level, but we did send out an article to the Globe and Mail in August saying we were seeing that Trump was trending among blacks and Hispanics and other people that the groups thought he was alienating.
So in other words, in both of those hugely significant historic events, you were seeing something that most of the typical pollsters were not seeing. What was it?
We were seeing what the trends were, and because we had huge samples of the population in the United States, we had 300,000 people in our sample. With Brexit, what we saw was that it was going to be a Remain until 3 days before the referendum, and it toggled because of the death of Joe Cox, the assassination of Joe Cox, and more precisely because of David Cameron's speech following that assassination, where he told people to observe a moment of silence and not talk about the referendum in honor of Joe Cox, and it was that silence that caused the exit, the AI determined, because people couldn't talk about their concerns, and so they took their concerns to the polls. So that's why for us, it's very important. Psychographics can do some of the work, but you also have to look at the events as they're unfolding and the issues and how they're impacting people, and you have to be able to measure it second by second to really see what impacts people are having and how to do the prescriptive analytics. That's why I say it's very complicated to do.
In which case, if anybody tells you today, more than 2 months before the next Ontario election, that they know how the next Ontario election is going to turn out, what do we say to them?
Well, you can, even like we're doing the measurement now, we are doing the measurement for the election, and we can see very clearly who is in the lead. But we're not publishing that right now because the people who are discussing the election right now they're kind of outliers. They're the politicos. We'll really know in May, June, when we see the average person coming out and talking about the issues, how it's going to go. Now, we were able to call the Trudeau win a month before it happened. And we are anticipating that the trend is strong enough in this particular election that we'll hopefully be able to call it fairly early. But I think it's too early right now.
Okay. Jacob, let me get you on here on this. People take for granted that advertising, both commercial and political, will try to appeal to us through our demographics, how old we are, what our gender is, where we live, how much money we make, all that kind of stuff. We seem to balk at the thought that this will be done through psychographics as what we like or how we feel. If so, why is that?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is the feeling that we're being manipulated. Nobody likes feeling they're manipulated. We like to feel like we have a sense of agency, we have autonomy over our personal decisions, and even if we're getting hit with heavy-handed demographic messages, we don't like that. You know, we don't like being pigeonholed into a certain category. So there's that respect, the desire to avoid manipulation. But on the other hand, there's also the privacy concerns, because psychographics require, in order to effectively use psychographics as part of your campaign, you need to amass a lot of information about someone. You need to gather and build a psychological profile. For many people, that is where the privacy boundaries come in, and they get concerned about their innermost thoughts and emotions and feelings coming out and being part of this campaign model to influence them.
In which case, in our last few moments here, let's see if we can figure out some kind of solution to this. Get off the internet, therefore they don't have access to our private information, or forget about the idea of traditional privacy. What do you think?
Well, getting off the internet's not going to help you, because if you're using your credit card, if you're engaging with any large organization today, you are in a database that has your behavioral profile. And there's a large market of consolidating this data. So one company collects information about you over here, another collects information about you over here, and any one of these, we don't worry too much about it. The problem is when they get amassed into one giant integrated database. That's where you have a very detailed profile of you as a human being and what you do and what you're interested in. So I think that's where the privacy concerns are. What we can do about it, I think that if we look at what the EU is doing with the data protection laws that are coming into effect this May, that is a good example of what we need to be thinking of in terms of the type of regulation for protecting individual privacy and individual data on the internet.
Aaron, in our last 30 seconds, you want to weigh in on that?
I agree on 100%. We need to look at what the EU is doing. They've done a lot of the legwork. They've got great legislation. I agree with Jacob that the problem is when we're collecting personally identifiable information and keeping that in a database so that people can look up and see what Steve thinks about certain issues. All we really need to know is that men in their 50s or with these psychographics, hedonistic travelers, that's all we need for the marketing and all that. We don't need to be keeping people's personally identifiable information in databases so that everybody who works for that organization can look it up. And in terms of, and I think that's the realistic thing we can do. People aren't going to give up Google Maps, all their social accounts, their games, their apps. All of these things are collecting personally identifiable information. So what we need to do is stop that, stop the personally identifiable information. You're not going to stop psychographic targeting or ad targeting. I mean, ads are targeted at people, young mothers get ads for baby things. That's going to continue. And sometimes, hey, that's information. If I'm a young mother, I want to know what products and things are available for people in my psychographic profile. So as long as it's not personally identifiable, I think that's where it crosses the line.
Right. Aaron, we're going to do a 4 or 5 hour broadcast on June the 7th for election night. Will you take my call on June the 6th? I think I need to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. All right. That's Erin Kelly, who's the CEO of Advanced Symbolics, Inc. She comes to us from the nation's capital. And Jacob Hirsch, Assistant Professor, Organizational Behavior and HR Management, UTM. Thanks so much to both of you for coming on TVO tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.